Well, we have a logistics crisis that has been brewing in this country, with models suggesting that it may have shaved nearly 7% of GDP just in 2020 alone. It's worsened by Transnet, which is struggling to revive its operations following years of corruption. Joining us is the African Rail Industry Association CEO, Mesela Nhlapo, Minerals Council South Africa Chief Economist Henk Langenhoven, and the United National Transport Union's spokesperson, Atenkosi Plaatjie. Good evening to all of you, and thank you so much for your time tonight. Henk, I want to perhaps begin with you from the perspective of the Minerals Council, but also just a more holistic view at what the lack of efficiency, what the broken down infrastructure and system at Transnet is really costing this country.
Evening, Kathy. I think one should understand that South Africa is a trading nation, and something like 60% of our GDP is generated by imports and exports, and a very large proportion of that is actually imports and exports of products. Of course, we sell services as well. And all of that is dependent on logistics. And Transnet is a very important part. Rail and the ports are a very important part of that whole scene. And I like to use the analogy of a spinning top. The interaction of trade is actually keeping the whole economy going. And logistics is so important. South Africa is actually a landlocked country. Most of the GDP is happening in Gauteng. And if I can go to mining is even further away from Gauteng, most of the activity. And it's very dependent on the bulk mining activity, iron ore, coal, manganese, chrome, etc., which need to be exported to the coast, and that is 800 kilometers from the inland, which is the most important part for us as mining. For the country, the Durban-Johannesburg route is the most important part because that's where all the freight in terms of manufacturing is happening. And that's really the perspective on this, and we need rail to be effective. And it's the most cost-effective. If it's run properly, it's the most cost-effective way of transporting a product. So the country is really dependent on. We spend, for example, double the amount of money on logistics than we spend on electricity, in the order of 400 billion a year. In electricity, about 200 billion. So that's really the perspective, I think, that one should have a look on this.
Henk, many in the sector have said that the deterioration is at a point where it can be described as treasonous, because ever so often we have different lines being brought to a complete standstill. Would you concur with a statement like that?
We are all in this together. I won't say that. And we all need to actually try and fix this. So it's the culmination of many years of no investment in maintenance, very little expansion of the rail infra. If you think about the rail infrastructure, I mean, the last time we built railway lines, big lines, were to Richards Bay and to Saldanha. And we haven't been expanding ports. The last time we expanded ports was Kucha. And the economy is growing. It's been growing at, say, 2 or 3%, if we were in good years. And the volume of trade has been expanding at a similar rate. So we have really fallen behind in the capacity that we have and in the maintenance of the capacity that we have. So it's just an important part of keeping an economy going, of keeping your car going, if I can use that analogy. Sure. If you don't take it for services, eventually it will break down, and this is exactly what we having now, and it's a culmination. If you talk to the aviation industry, they will always tell you it's a small fault that happens a year or 2 or 3 earlier with an aircraft, and eventually the aircraft crashed because of the culmination of errors that then happen after that.
Mesela, when we talk about some of the consequences that South Africans are living with today as a result of state capture, the Eskom story perhaps is one that's easier to tell because people live with load shedding. They understand sort of what the impact of that on their daily lives is. The Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, in his work of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, described Transnet as the primary site of state capture. And I wonder then how much of where this institution is today and the inability to sort of reform to what the industry expects is as a result of some of those broken down systems within it organizationally.
Good evening. We have been through for the last 3 years saying Transnet this, Transnet that, showing the numbers, informing South Africans that we will find ourselves at this point. And at this point, as the President has said, it is catastrophic proportions that we're looking at. However, there are good railways and railway men and women at the state-owned institution that will be able to work with under the Transport and Logistics Committee. So we think that let's rather we know already, we've been sharing what the problems are for the past 3 years, and the numbers, and we did ring the alarm bell. But from where we are, it's not about Transnet, it's not about, it's about South Africa. It's about saving our heritage. It's about saving whatever is left. It's about those companies that are railway companies that supply to the likes of Transnet, and that they come back and restore employment. We have got one company that is currently working 2 days. So with the changes that we can put in place through the National Logistics Committee, which will be, I suppose, be given powers to move fast and bring business, bringing in resources to ensure that at least we start with the coal line first, to get the coal moving into the port. And as Henk said, that we should not view rail in a separation. Ports were built for rail, so we need to make sure that going forward, we are the South Africa that we claim to be, that we are good in our logistics sector. We must show it, but that can only work when we work as South Africans, if we work as one, if we support the National Logistic Crisis Committee, if we support the job that has been saved, the little jobs that are still there today. We need to make sure that we support Transnet in all means necessary. We don't want to find ourselves here anymore. And I think that the lack of maintenance is an issue. And Katie, I've often said that when one is an engineer, you understand why maintenance is supposed to be done, because you sort of link your investment to you link your investment to the maintenance. So we know that maintenance, if it's not done, you'll not be able to move forward or grow as an organization that is engineer-led. And I think generally, looking at Eskom or looking at Transnet or any of the state entities, I think one thing that is that comes out clearly is the lack of maintenance.
All right.
So what we don't know is that the lack of maintenance is because people don't know or are not willing to do so.
Atenkosi, let me come to you, because some of the figures that we're looking at here, in terms of how much, you know, these maintenance issues that result in lines being closed cost the economy on a day-to-day basis. But, you know, one estimate putting it at close to 7% GDP. This, of course, talks to a disruption in supply chain. So if goods are getting stuck at the ports, it means that those that are producing them have to produce less. And if they're moving less, then they need less people. And that's how it affects ordinary South Africans, because I have a job today, but tomorrow I wake up and suddenly I'm not needed at work until further notice. How do we make sure that that message sort of is driven home? Because that is the full impact of the problems that we're facing right now. Atenkosi, I think you're on mute. If you can just unmute yourself, please.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that.
Sure.
Okay. Good morning. Good evening, Kathy, and good evening to your viewers. As you have said, that because there are so many disruptions that happen on our railway lines, you find that every depot or branch that we visit, our members and employees of TFR face this uncertainty of whether will I have a job tomorrow if coal is not moving. Because we've had members who complain to say that I'm going to work, but I'm only doing 50% of the work that I used to do last year. So the employee morale is really, really down. And I think our members and employees of TFR are just facing a lot of uncertainty about the future. And then there's this talk of PSPs, and the question is, where do they go? Do they fit into this narrative or to this whole new process of private sector participation? Will they have a job tomorrow? So there is a lot of uncertainty that faces employees because of this. And also you'll find that also the vandalism of the railway infrastructure is also costing TFR billions a year. We've spoken to members who say that they fix a certain line and then 30 minutes later, another part has been vandalized. So we believe that, and we've raised the bell to say that there are syndicates that are operating in our railway lines, and we want the government to start doing something about this, ramp up security, because obviously what we're doing is not enough if 30 minutes later, after you fix one section of the railway line, it's already vandalized again.
Henk, if the problem is as a result of syndicates, and all of you are talking about a holistic approach, so involving the private sector, the public sector together, stakeholders, then what needs to happen in order to fully unmask these syndicates and bring people to book? Because it sounds like Transnet is overwhelmed by the situation. The police also, not only dealing with, these syndicates in rail, but also in electricity.
Can I start with an experience that we had on Wednesday, where I'm responsible for chrome ore and ferrochrome exports, and it goes to Richards Bay and Maputo. And we had a whole day session with Transnet. I'm very impressed with the underlying changes that are happening. On the crime situation, they've changed the way they engage with the service provider to prevent the crime, because that's really what should happen. It's not about how many people you are eventually getting in court. Of course, that's true as well, but to prevent it. And we are impressed with what we saw. We are impressed with the changes that they're making on the rail line and the maintenance that is coming. And we are impressed with the attitude of whatever new ideas you have on locomotives. For example, there was a long discussion about, are we going to get the Chinese back or not? We may. But the private sector is also willing to actually try and fix the ones that are standing and that need some maintenance. And there's been a very good spirit. There's been a change in the attitude that we are, like I said earlier, we are in this together, and we have to fix this. I mean, on chrome, we had a massive change in transport away from rail because of the problems that you've been explaining, and away from Richards Bay to Maputo. But that's also not without its own problems. The border post can't handle all the trucks. The railway line can't handle all the trucks. But in the process, we've learned a lot. And we've been able to make incremental changes. And really, life is about that. You make small changes, and eventually you have a massive change at the end.
All right.
And the end is that we need to get the export going. And I must tell you, it was really refreshing. It's happening on the manganese line, as you probably saw in the press. There's a lot of cooperation happening on the iron ore line. And maybe I should just give you a perspective. Half of what mining is exporting, which is about 900 billion in total, about half of that is actually dependent on the rail and port system. And we are only a small portion of something like 3.8 trillion of product that are imported and exported. And I think the spirit has changed. The crisis committee will help because we can infuse knowledge and expertise on that. And in mining, we're working on the corridors with specific knowledge about the technicalities of what needs to happen.
All right.
So it is a problem, but things are happening underneath that will show in future.
All right. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. That's all we have time for. Thank you to all of our guests for coming onto the show, giving us the various perspectives. So some form of glimmer of hope in terms of resolving the issues at Transnet.